Brace yourself. Gonna blast up anytime now. Collect yourself. Things will never be the same in this sad, sad world.
Hello friends, and welcome to this special bonus holiday episode of Humanities Class. Today is Friday, April 10th, 2020, coming to you from the bowels of quarantine. When we started this class in August, we said that the humanities are an exploration and a celebration of what it means to be human. Our focus has been on philosophy. It's a major part of the humanities. But the humanities also include things like literature, art, music, movies and TV are humanities. And it also includes religion. When we say humanities explores what it means to be human, religion is a big part of that for most people in the world. Exploring religion in a public school setting is different than exploring it as you might in a faith-based setting. The public school is not the place to explore questions such as, is any particular religion right? What do I need to do to please God or the gods? How do I find enlightenment or salvation? The public school classroom is not the place to explore those questions, as important as you might find them to be. Those questions are for you and your family and your culture to choose to explore or not explore, however you see fit in your private life. In a school setting, we look at religion to see the impact it has had on the way peoples and cultures develop, on the way peoples and cultures understand themselves, understand their relationship to the world. Religion is a hugely influential force in society today, and it has been as long as there has been society. So that's the context we use when we explore religion in a school setting. One thing that all religions have in common, and guys, there's not much. Religion is very diverse. But one thing that religions all have in common is that all religions set aside certain days, times, or seasons as holy, as special, as festivals, holy days. And that's what our word holiday means. We slap holy and day together, you get holiday. Holy days, holidays, festivals are special times that come up within the year that direct believers' attention to the principles, themes, stories of their religion. It's an important way that many people find meaning in their life. Those holy days, those holidays are often tied to the changing of the seasons. We've recently transferred out of winter and into spring. Cultures all over the world use those transition times between seasons as an invitation to reflect more deeply on the things that their various faiths and religions tell them are important. And it makes sense if you think about it, that the changing of seasons would be holy to people. We don't feel it as deeply here in Florida, where the difference between one season and the other is not that big a deal. But in much of the world where it freezes in the winter, wintertime is dark and cold and dangerous, and you can't grow any food, and it seems as if the earth has died. Springtime comes around, it warms up, the ground thaws, the crops grow, and it seems as if the earth has come back from the dead. Cultures all over the world look at those transition points and say, this is a holy time. The Muslim people will begin celebrating Ramadan later this month. The Hindu people marked the beginning of their religious new year at the end of March. Wiccans and people who identify with pagan traditions are very focused on nature being sacred and are very intent on marking the turning of the seasons as holy times. This time right now in our own culture, some of the largest religious groups are celebrating some of the most important and sacred moments in their communities and cultural lives. The Jewish people are in the middle of the 7 or 8, people celebrate it different ways, it's not just that I don't know, in the 7 or 8-day festival of Passover. Passover celebrates the Jewish people's origin story. Superheroes have origin stories. Spider-Man is bit by a radioactive spider. The Incredible Hulk is caught in the blast of a gamma bomb. Cultures have origin stories too. And ancient cultures usually tie those origin stories to their religions. So the Jewish people celebrate Passover, remembering the important story to them of when their ancestors, the Hebrews, were held as slaves in Egypt for 300 years, and then were led to freedom by Moses, someone whom God, in their belief, had sent to them to free them from slavery. They leave Egypt, they cross the Red Sea. You've probably seen the movie, you probably know the story from other sources, but you've probably seen the movie. Moses lifts his hands up and the waters part. They wade through and then walk across the Red Sea on dry land. Takes them a little while if you're familiar with the story, but they find their own homeland in the land of Israel. That's what is commemorated by the Jewish people in the Passover. Passover is very influential even outside of the Jewish faith, because the Christian faith and the Muslim faith have both inherited the traditions of Judaism, of the Jewish religion and the Jewish Bible. And so that Passover story is important to all 3 religions. Here in our own country, the ancient Israelites were not the only slaves in history, unfortunately. And we know that our own country in its early days was built on the backs of slave labor. Innocent men, women, and children unjustly captured in their homeland in Africa, forced to come over here and enslaved. The story of Passover was very important to the African American slaves. Many of the songs that were written by slaves and sung in the fields are about Passover. It's a way for them to express their hope that just like the story says the ancient Israelite slaves found freedom, they too would find freedom. They too would be able to wade across the water of slavery and into freedom. The Christian people today celebrate, commemorate, mark the day Good Friday. Good Friday commemorates the death of their founder, Jesus, who was crucified by the Roman Empire. It's deeply connected to the Jewish feast of Passover, because the events in the Christian story that are celebrated this weekend take place during the Jewish feast of Passover. The Last Supper that it is said that Christ had with his disciples was a Passover meal. Sunday then will mark Easter, which for most Christians is the holiest day of the year, which celebrates their belief that death was not strong enough to hold Jesus, and that instead he rose from the dead in triumph, and that his resurrection means that he will be the first of many to triumph over death, that he defeats death so that his followers can find eternal life. That's the most important story in the Christian faith. Christianity has been the majority religion in the West since the 4th century, so for 1,600 years. The religion itself is about 2,000 years old. It took about 400 years for it to become the majority religion in our Western megaculture, and it has been the majority religion in our country since its founding. For those of my students whose families and cultures celebrate these feasts, Passover, Good Friday, I shouldn't call it a feast, Easter, you're probably celebrating very differently this year than you have in the past. Probably unable to participate in many of the important things that your family, your culture has always used to mark these important, meaningful moments in your life. I hope you are able, those of you who commemorate these feasts, I hope you are able to do so in your homes with your families in a way that gives you comfort. And I think if there's a common message to the holidays that are being marked right now, it is a message of hope. So I hope that those who celebrate these holidays can take some hope in those stories. Being stuck at home in quarantine while a plague is going around outside of our walls, that's a type of slavery. That's something we long to be liberated, freed from. We long to find the crossing across the sea out of this captivity. Illness, suffering, the fear that we don't know where it's going to come next, that's a type of crucifixion. That is a cross that everybody on earth is carrying right now. And hopefully those who commemorate these holidays will also find some hope that on the other side of this, there can be some resurrection. I'm going to close today by sharing a song with you called Wade in the Water. Wade in the Water is one of many African American spirituals. Those are songs that are actually written by enslaved people in the 19th century, that were sung by the enslaved people as they labored and worked and sweat in the fields under the whips of the taskmasters who dared to pretend that they owned them as property. It's a song, it's a secret code that gave them hope. They sing Wade in the Water. The slave masters, whatever, as long as they keep working. But Wade in the Water told them that there is a route to freedom, that we will cross the sea out of our captivity, out of our suffering. We will be free. We are not property. We are men, we are women, we are children, and we will find our freedom and dignity. For many, the struggle for freedom and dignity still goes on. We talked a couple weeks ago about how there are many people who are still excluded, still treated as second class. But the main hope of the slaves who wrote this song did come true. They did find their freedom. So this, written by slaves, sung in the field by slaves, and now sung by a group called the Blind Boys of Alabama. All of these singers are blind men. Take a couple minutes and listen to Wade in the Water.
Wade in the water, come on and wade in the water, children, wade in the water. My Lord, my God, gonna trouble the water. Come on and wade. ready to mourn. Oh, yeah. All I want you to do for me, and that's to give that bell a tone. Well, come on and wait in the water. Wait in the water. All the children wait in the water. My God's gonna trouble the water. When I get in glory, well, I'm gonna shake my mother's hand. Oh, yes. I'm gonna tell her all about my troubles while traveling through this land. Well, come on and wait in the water. Wait in the water. Children, wait in the water. My God's gonna trouble the water. Come on and wait in the water. Wait in the water. Children, wait in the water. My Lord, my God's gonna trouble the water.
Walk around a lot a bit, trying to make the pieces fit to a puzzle with a million missing pieces. When I'm feeling fine is when I discover that I'm afraid to blow my cover, and there's something very wrong with this. So sit back in your hole, or get back in your cave. If I'm going down, I'm taking someone with me.